Good morning and welcome to Vulnerable Moments with Miss E. Today is Thursday, May 14th, 2020, and today's topic is stop running. For years after my mother died of cancer and my father was viciously murdered, I began running in every realm of my life. In fact, my recovery, the fact that I overcame those emotional obstacles, those mental obstacles, is the reason why I started this brand called Ascension Complete. This is the reason why I wrote my book. There were so many other people, women who were in prison or in jail, who were running emotionally, who were running physically, who had been abused. For me, I was enduring or had endured multiple emotional losses. And so I began running, and what I noticed was that my baby sister was physically running as well. There were times when we were on our way to drop her off at school, and in one instance, she actually, when we stopped at a red light, she got out of the car and started running because of the pain inside of her, because of the resentment for the situation that our mother was gone. In fact, all the emotional strain and hurt and pain that my sister experienced is the reason why I actually went to school to get my degree and license in social work. Because I needed to understand what she was going through. I knew what I was going through. I knew that I had been grieving. But for a 14, 16-year-old kid to be running and rebelling the way she was, I needed to understand her. I tried everything, bringing our sisterhood into counseling. But I was resenting for that. We were lashing out against each other. The emotional and the emotional ties and the bonds were broken because we were all angry. We were all frustrated. So one of the things that I had been doing, myself was running, but I would run physically and travel. I had a travel squad. I had a group of girlfriends that we would just take trips to different countries. Like, if you didn't have stamps in your passport, you wasn't going nowhere. It was basically our philosophy. And so we would go from country to country, traveling, having an amazing time, being exposed to amazing views and things and activities. But the reality was that we were all running from something. I had one girlfriend running because she was in a relationship and she wanted more. She was running from the fact that she had lost a sibling to murder. So we were all packing our bags physically to travel, but emotionally we were carrying baggage as well. And we were each other's peace. We were in a different presence. We were trying to find our heaven on earth. We were trying to get away from the madness. But the reality was we were running it, and we finally admitted that to one another. That there was pain that we were carrying, not in our suitcases, but we were mentally and emotionally filled with pain, and we were trying to run from it. We were trying to mask it with a good time. We were going from country to country, city to city, having an amazing time. But the reality was, at the end of the night, after everybody took their own flights to get back to their personal destinations, to go back to their separate cities, to nestle back into their own homes in their separate areas of either Philly or another city, we were still in pain individually after the losses of parents and siblings and babies even. There were so many emotional scars being carried. Another way that I was running was because I was in this phase, in the grief stage where I felt like if I threw myself into my professional business or work, I would be all right. So Monday through Thursday, I would entrench myself in school at UPenn or the University of Pennsylvania, working on my master's degree. And then I would be working as many hours as they needed me at the University of Pennsylvania. But the reality is I was still grieving. I had never, ever let out how I felt emotionally. I had never gone to grief counseling. You know, when my mother and father's death occurred, I was physically and emotionally in shock. In fact, the day that I found out that my mother had passed, I froze and fainted. The day that my father, we were set to go to his funeral, I was in the middle of the street, frozen on Germantown Avenue here in Philly. And couldn't move and was about to get hit by a car. If it wasn't for a neighbor of mine who was going to the store with me, I would have probably been dead or in the hospital the day of my father's funeral, because I was numb. I was frozen. I was in shock. I couldn't move. Everything in my body had shut down because of the pain that I felt from that loss. Here's the reality. I had to stop running. Once I stopped traveling, once I began to really understand what was happening to me, it was the day that I received my acceptance letter to the master's program at the University of Pennsylvania, and I went to pick up the phone to call my mom because I hadn't ever accepted her death. I mean, this is 2 years after she died. And immediately in the middle of my office, I broke down crying because I had been running. I had been running from my pain. And guess what? I couldn't call my mom. I broke down crying. Everybody thought I had just lost somebody, but I never was able to grieve. Every instance and every turning point in which I thought I was able to grieve, there was always somebody telling me that I couldn't. That my mom wouldn't have wanted that. That this was not the time. I mean, even at her funeral, I was told you have to be strong. Not right now, was what they told me. Not right now. This is not the time. You got to be strong for your siblings. You got your baby brother in your arms. You got to be strong. You can't do that right now. So when is the right time? When is the right time to grieve? You know, to grieve. And what I found was the right time was then. The right time was now. The right time was in the present moment. And that I was able, and I should have been able to grieve appropriately. But unfortunately, society tells us that we have to grieve at certain times and only for a certain period of times. And I tell you today, stop running. Face it. Face it right now, because you don't want to have to face it in the future, because you don't know whether that ton of bricks that was going to hit you emotionally is going to actually end up being a whole building. That might be an entire community of bricks that's going to hit you if you wait too long. No one wants to be in a psych ward. I don't want you in a psych ward. So I encourage you right in this moment to stop running. Another way that I was running was by continuously having different jobs. You know, that feeling, that reward system that I gave myself, because every time I turned around and opened up my mailbox, I wasn't opening up my mailbox for bills. I was opening up my mailbox for checks. I was opening up my mailbox for checks, not bills. I had paid all my bills. I was living way below my means. I had my own apartment, and I was opening up my mailbox to checks because I was working around the clock. You know, I had it. So financially, I was cool. I was traveling back and forth to Florida so much that people thought I lived there. But then let's take another turn. Let's figure out the other places in which I was running and how I was running. Socially, even though I was on a trip filled with people having an amazing time with me, they probably were wondering, why is she sleeping? We're on the beach. We're having a day party. We're having a great time. And here I am laid back, sleeping. Because I wanted that heavenly sensation, that heavenly feeling of being in the presence of my mom. The reality was I was surrounded by tons of people, but I was still isolated emotionally and mentally. I was still trying to run away from what was in front of me. Even the good time that was being had around me, I still was struggling with the loss of my mother. But still wearing my beautiful smile, still remaining fit, still remaining sharp as a tack when it was time to go out. I was still trying to get it. I was still trying to, make sure that I could live out the dreams that my mother couldn't. Everything that I wanted her to be exposed to, I tried to do. So emotionally, I was actually trying to get past all that. And my way, whether it was laying on a beach, whether it was being in a club and, falling asleep while my friends are partying around me, escaping everything, I was still running. I was still, even though I was surrounded by many people, I was still lonely. I was still dealing with loneliness because I couldn't go home and have my mom hold me, because I couldn't go home and have those real conversations with my mother. I had lost her. I was still that teenager, that young adult that would still come home to mom and get in bed with my mom and lay on her chest or allow her to hold me or have girl talk with her. That was the girl that I was. That was the young lady that I was. And that was the type of mom that she was. So how else was I running? Well, spiritually, I stopped praying. I really stopped praying. I really stopped. I was going to church, but I don't think I was present with the Lord. I was angry. You got to remember, I lost my parents back to back. I lost my mom in August of 2004, and I turned around not even a complete year later. And my dad, I lost my dad in July of 2004 to murder. And not even a year later, my mom in August, she was actually diagnosed and she died of cancer. I'm sure I got my years mixed up because I'm overexcited. But needless to say, I lost them back to back, not even a year apart. But I say all that to say I was running physically by traveling. I was running emotionally because I hadn't talked to anybody about it. And because even though I was still traveling in the physical form with tons of people, I was actually isolated. I was actually still feeling lonely in the midst of millions and millionaires, to be honest with you. And on top of that, I was running spiritually because I had lost contact with God, because I was angry, because I was questioning why. After all these years, my mom had been through her ups and downs, with the streets, that as soon as she finally gets herself together, you take her from me. After all the years my sisters and my grandmothers prayed her out of the streets, God, you take her from me. Those were the conversations I had with God. I was angry. How could you take the people that birthed me? How can you take the one woman that gave birth to me? How could you take the one man that planted the seed for me? How? But it was so. That was God's plan. I was also running professionally because I really just had myself wrapped up in my work. Working more than 16 and who works 20 hours in a day? Whatever they needed, I was there. Socially, being surrounded by people and still feeling lonely. Mentally, not really accepting it. That grieving process is real, you guys. It's real, ladies. My love life, that was in shambles because I was running into the comforts of what I thought were comforts of men who wasn't even ready for somebody like me, who understood that I had lost my parents, who knew they were dealing with something fragile, but couldn't really actually deal with this fragile thing. They weren't equipped for me. They actually added to my trauma at the time. So in my love life, it was in shambles. Family-wise, me and my siblings were going head to head. I didn't have any children, thank God. But we weren't getting along. My family, everybody was on the brink. There was just so much drama going on in my family. So I was running from all of that. All I wanted was to be a beautiful butterfly, to be a free spirit, to be able to do my own thing and be uninterrupted. So I tell you all, grieve properly. Grieve properly. Get the counseling that you need. Take time for you. Grieve at your own pace. Don't allow anyone to rush you through, whether it's taking FMLA from work to grieve properly, whether it's actually going to see a counselor 2-3 times a week. When I finally did that, that helped me. You have to do what you need for you. I want you all to do what's necessary. Thank you for listening to yet another episode of Vulnerable Moments with Miss E. You have an amazing day on purpose. Today's topic is stop running. God bless.